ask. He offered. He came up. He got out of his car and came up to me. It was about the only time I've seen a police officer approach my vehicle, and I was happy about it. Usually they have a scowl on their face.
Well, I've got one last question for you. And I've noticed that people call you by your first name a lot more often than other mayors. Okay. Honest, how do you feel about that?
That's great with me. I think the title
it feels disrespectful.
Why?
I don't want to call you Mattie. That's weird.
I think titles are stupid. I do. Look, I really do. Here's why.
I'm squinting my eyes, but yes, go ahead.
I earn the respect from people without the title, right? If someone wants
Fair.
to call me Mayor Mattie or Mayor Parker or Mattie, I don't care. You'll know from me if I thought you were disrespectful, irrespective of how you referred to me.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean that because, okay, let's take Congress right now.
Mm-hmm.
How dysfunctional it is and how everybody acts and behaves in this bubble of Washington, D.C. I have no interest in that. I just want to do a good job for my city. And I like you, I love the city. My husband and I lived here for 15 years. We are raising young children. We want to be a part of this community. I want nothing that separates me from real life.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, some people are really particular and they want to call me mayor. Wonderful. But if someone calls me Mattie, wonderful. I do not care.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor Parker.
There you go.
Appreciate
it.
I can't do it.
Okay.
My takeaways from a discussion with Mattie, really my first one is when looking at decision making, that it's important to have clearly defined how you are categorizing certain things. So what I mean by that is I had asked her about ROI. Now, to me, ROI is return on investment in monetary terms. If I invest $100,000 and I get 110 back. Okay. So I had asked her about that, and her answer was around partnership involvement, which was an answer I was not expecting. And so to her, a positive return on investment is how many people are involved and enrolled positively in that expenditure, whether it's volunteer organizations, other governments, the residents. Those. So I thought that was a really interesting way to define ROI for her, and that informs the decisions, which are very different from how perhaps you would if your ROI definition was just monetary or tax-based increase. The other was
it's interesting to view those types of decisions in that way. I think that's a gut instinct for most people, is to say, okay, well, if I'm evaluating the return on the investment, then I put dollars in, I got to get dollars back.
Right.
And that's not always the case. I mean, we make investment in ourselves to learn. Well,
right.
Sometimes we're able to calculate that and say, okay, well, I paid this for a college degree and it's going to raise my salary by this, therefore the investment is worth it. But other times, what type of return on investment are you getting on your yoga classes?
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
Who
so,
knows?
what are the return on investment on health-related benefits, for example, and those types of
so
things?
I think it was interesting because I hadn't put it through my mind that way.
Yeah, I had
before.
not either.
I'd see some politicians talk about certain investments in public projects, and I would think to myself cynically what you thought, which is, oh, well, that's just an expense. It's just an expense. How are we as a city getting our money back? How is we as a state or a country? But that's important to understand in any decision. If I'm going into this, what do I hope to get out of it?
Yeah.
And what would I have to get out of it to make this worth it?
Well, I think the challenge is many times is when you're looking at making a decision is defining what that ROI is that may not be the best definition. In other words, monetary return may not be the best. Looking outside of those things, I think is many times, more often than we give it credit for, might be a good idea.
Yeah, we kind of did that with this podcast. We didn't start and say, well, we're gonna spend all this money and time, and by year 2 we're gonna be making $500,000. No, we didn't think about that way. We knew that the return on investment was the experience that we would have, the learnings we would have, the connections we would make, and how we would grow as individuals by being able to talk to people like Mayor Parker and other people that we've had on the show. But we had to know that before going in, so that once we got there and we turn around one day and go, oh, wait a second, is this worth it? Well, it's easy to answer that question and say yes because we knew exactly what we were hoping to get.
Right. If you looked at something like a podcast and said, what is the return on investment? Are you monetizing business endeavors? Then you would say, oh, this is, no, you're not.
Yeah, I'm not trying to.
Not trying to. So I'll give you another example. So she defined success. I was asking her specifically about rail or public transportation, and she was talking about how that moves through the city.
Yeah.
And she said, we want it to be successful. I said, well, how are you defining successful? Now, my definition of that would be how quickly can I move this person from point A to point B?
Yeah.
Right. And how efficiently can I do that? So how cheaply, how rapidly can I do that? Her definition of success, she said community contact, which I was not prepared for. And so and I think that's a praiseworthy goal, but it's not one that I would have factored in making my decisions. That's not why I'm not mayor.
Yeah.
But that and several other reasons, I'm sure.
I think it's interesting talking to her made me realize that there are some people, and I might have been one of them, that said, well, the leaders in our government need to have run a business before. Those are going to be the best people because they really understand how to get things done. Well, okay, yeah, true. But someone who was a business owner, I exclusively had no public sector experience, didn't have any experience in government at all, probably isn't going to think of the things that she was outlining.
Right. And we've had politicians that have been in positions of power that have only had business experience who failed to look at all the all the constituencies the way that she outlined. I'll give you another example. We were talking about trends that concerned her. And one of the things that, and I would look at, I would expect an answer like crime or something, something urban sprawl, whatever it is, normal answers. What she said was increasing housing affordability or increasing housing costs, and looking at what the city government has to do in that in terms of providing support for people who need public housing assistance and things like that. And it's interesting because it goes back to that same point about how are you thinking about what is success? How are you thinking about the constituencies that need to be addressed? How are you thinking about what is the return on investment? And really thoroughly evaluating what are you trying to do here can really inform decision making for better or for worse.
Well, I think it's only for the better, right?
Hers is for the better, but I'm saying if you have not done that thoroughly, you're going to end up with worse decisions.
Yeah. But understanding what the ideal outcome is or what you hope to have happen or how you define success, that's critical. And it's really easy to not do that. It's really, especially like as a team, it's easy to expect that other people define success in the same way that I do. And that's not the case. You and I might have a different version of success. And if we don't agree to what success is before we start making choices, we're going to frustrate the hell out of each other. And that's only amplified when you're leading people. That's only amplified when you're the mayor, I'm sure. So it's amazing how good she is at that, because that's a real skill in mastering decision making and defeating bad decision making, to do that methodically and meticulously define success and really have a good understanding of it. It's in the same sense understanding what that ideal self is as we make values-based decisions and seek alignment in life with our decisions and our goals and our actions. That's so key, but it can be applied in areas where it may seem as if our values have less of an impact. So in business goal planning, in city planning, in anything. I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from her. And we kind of touched on it in a couple of different ways. But even in the areas where culture or where success is harder to define, like protecting the culture of Fort Worth, what does that mean? Well, I got to understand what the culture is. And I've heard business owners talk about, well, we want to protect the culture of our team. Well, what the hell is your culture? And not just the core values of the company. Like, really, what is the culture? How would you articulate it? If I asked every single person, what would they say? And when I asked her about what's the culture of Fort Worth, she, of course, had a better answer than I would have had, unsurprisingly. But that was encouraging to know, hey, this is actually something that she's thought out. She's trying to protect the culture of Fort Worth. And of course, she has thought it through to understand it's more than just people are friendly here. It's more than just, we got the big city and the small town feel. It's more than that. It's a pioneering spirit that informs the art that comes out of this city, the entertainment that comes out of this city. And if your business, your understanding of your business's culture, your team's culture, your family's culture isn't as thought out as her answer was to the culture of Fort Worth, you're never going to be able to protect it. Thanks for listening to this episode of Decidedly. I hope you learned something. I know I did. If you thought our show was 5-star worthy, please check us out on iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It really helps out a lot, helps people find our community and defeat bad decision making in their own lives. Check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Decidedly Podcast. Until next time, I'm Sanger Smith with Sean Smith. This is Decidedly.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Decidedly Podcast. To be notified when new episodes are released, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, drop us a 5-star review because it helps more people defeat bad decision-making right alongside you. For show notes, decision-making insights, more episodes, and links to resources mentioned in this episode, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com. If you'd like us to help you make a decision, leave us a message at decidedlypodcast.com/makeMyDecision for a chance to have your question featured in an upcoming episode. For more decision-making content, check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Decidedly Podcast. As always, thanks for listening. This is Decidedly. Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers who are not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their own opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.